Have you ever wondered what truly happens after we die? Not just the stories we hear or the ideas we read in books, but the real, raw experience, especially when it feels like the whole world is falling apart. Emily Carter was an ordinary woman living in Bristol, England, a mother, a friend, a teacher, struggling with doubts about faith, about her purpose, and about whether there was truly anything waiting for us on the other side. Like so many of us, she wondered, is there light beyond the darkness? Is there any hope after the final breath? But what if, in the darkest night of her life, she crossed that invisible line? What if she saw something so terrifying, so unforgettable, that it changed not only her life, but might change yours too? Emily's story isn't just about death. It's about facing our deepest fears, discovering hidden truths, and realizing that every second counts. Before you continue, I want you to think, have you ever questioned your own beliefs about the afterlife? Do you fear what might come next, or do you try to ignore it? Write in the comments, what is your greatest fear about life after death? Your answer could inspire someone else to reflect too. Emily Carter's life was, in many ways, ordinary, but never easy. At 38, she had built a quiet existence in the city of Bristol. She worked as a secondary school teacher, pouring her heart into helping teenagers discover who they were, even as she herself felt lost sometimes. She lived with her teenage daughter, Lily, after a painful divorce that left her questioning not just love, but the goodness of life itself. Emily loved Sunday mornings in the park, the smell of rain on old stone streets, the comfort of her mother's voice on the phone. Yet behind her gentle smile, she wrestled with spiritual emptiness, a kind of ache that nothing in her daily life seemed to fill. She attended church sporadically, hoping for answers, but often left with more questions than before. At night, lying in bed, she wondered if her prayers even reached beyond her ceiling. Her friends sometimes described her as thoughtful, even wise, but few knew the battles she fought inside. Was God really listening? Did her life have meaning? Or was she just drifting, waiting for some miracle that never seemed to arrive? Emily's story could be anyone's story. Maybe, in some ways, it's yours. But all of that, her doubts, her questions, her ordinary routines, were about to be shattered on a night when darkness fell deeper than she ever imagined. Emily's days were filled with responsibilities, but her nights belonged to doubt. Between preparing lessons and helping Lily with homework, she often found herself staring into space, lost in thoughts that made her heart ache. The world outside saw her as strong, reliable, the kind of person who always had a kind word or a helping hand to offer. Inside, though, Emily felt like she was crumbling. Bills piled up, unexpected expenses tested her patience, and single motherhood sometimes felt like an impossible mountain to climb. There were moments when loneliness would hit her so hard, she would sit quietly on her kitchen floor after Lily went to bed, tears streaming down her face, praying for a sign, any sign, that things would get better. Her faith wavered in the silence. She had read about miracles, heard others talk about answered prayers, but what about her? Why did her pleas seem to vanish into nothingness? Emily tried to fill the void with busy days and endless to-do lists, but nothing could quiet the haunting questions that followed her. What if I'm not enough? What if there really is nothing after this life? Sometimes, she would walk alone by the Avon River, searching for peace. Other times, she'd light a candle at her bedside, whispering hopes into the flickering shadows. But the doubts were always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for quiet moments to remind her how fragile she truly felt. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by doubt, even when everything looks fine on the outside? Share your experience in the comments. Your words might help someone who feels alone right now. It was a Friday, the end of a long week, when everything shifted. The weather in Bristol had turned unusually dark and stormy. Emily, exhausted but determined to keep going, finished her last class and hurried to pick up Lily from her friend's house. Thunder rumbled in the distance as she drove, rain hammering against the windshield, making it hard to see. That day, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, lesson plans, unpaid bills, what to make for dinner. So many worries, all colliding at once. She barely noticed the red light until it was too late. Tires screeched, a blinding flash of headlights, the sickening crunch of metal twisting and breaking. Time seemed to slow, then stop altogether. Emily's body was weightless, tumbling, surrounded by the screams of bending steel and shattered glass. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, an absolute, terrifying silence. She tried to scream for Lily, to move, to breathe, but everything was slipping away, the world narrowing to a tunnel of darkness. As the rain poured over the crumpled wreck, emergency lights flickered in the distance. Emily's heart fluttered weakly. She felt herself sinking as if the darkness was swallowing her whole. Pause for a moment. Can you imagine how fragile life really is? Have you or someone you know ever experienced a life-changing event in just a single moment? Share your story or your thoughts in the comments. Someone might need to hear it right now. Everything faded. Sound, color, even pain, leaving only a strange, floating sensation. Emily was aware of her body slumped in the driver's seat, but it felt distant, almost unreal. She could no longer hear the storm or the sirens. There was only the faint rhythm of her heart, slowing, then faltering. In those last seconds, her life didn't flash before her eyes like in the movies. Instead, Emily felt an overwhelming wave of regret. Words left unspoken, love left ungiven, moments wasted on fear and doubt. She wanted desperately to hold Lily again, to apologize for every time she'd lost her patience, to tell her how much she was loved, but her voice was gone. She was slipping further, as if being pulled gently by invisible hands. The darkness was absolute. Time lost all meaning. Panic threatened to rise, but in its place came an odd sense of surrender, almost like falling asleep, except she knew, deep down, she would never wake up again. There was no more pain, no more struggle, just the soft, unrelenting pull of something beyond. In those last moments, Emily understood how thin the veil really is between life and death. She wondered, had she done enough? Had she mattered? Would anyone remember her, truly? Take a moment to reflect. If you knew today was your last, what would you want to say or do? Write your thoughts in the comments. Maybe this is the sign you've been waiting for. Leaving the body and total darkness. Suddenly, Emily felt herself drifting upward, like a feather caught on a silent breeze. She looked down and saw her own broken body tangled in the wreckage, paramedics moving frantically around her. It was surreal. She felt no pain, only a distant sadness as she watched the scene below, as if she were seeing someone else's tragedy. The world she knew, her life, her worries, her hopes, was now far beneath her. But then, everything changed. The light faded quickly, replaced by a suffocating, endless blackness. Emily felt herself suspended in an empty void. There were no sounds, no colors, no sense of time, only a cold darkness pressing against her soul. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be utterly alone. As minutes, or maybe years, passed in that emptiness, a primal fear began to rise within her. Had she been forgotten? Was this all there was after death? A void, a cold silence, an unending night? Desperate, she tried to call out, to move, but she had no voice, no body, nothing to cling to. Just when she thought the darkness would consume her completely, a distant glimmer appeared. Barely a spark, but enough to make her hope again. Was someone there? Or was it just her imagination? Now I want to ask you, have you ever felt completely alone, like no one could hear or reach you? How did you find hope again? Share your experience in the comments. Your words could help someone find their own light in the darkness. The encounter with hell, fear, pain, and despair. The faint spark in the darkness was swallowed by something far more terrifying, a choking, sulfurous heat that wrapped itself around Emily like burning chains. Suddenly, the void was alive with movement, writhing shadows twisting into grotesque shapes. Screams echoed from every direction, not just heard, but felt deep inside her soul. Emily realized, with horror, that she was not alone. The pain was immediate, raw, and inescapable. Emotional wounds laid bare, every regret and failure magnified 1,000 times. The world around her flickered, revealing visions of other souls, some weeping, others raging, all trapped in their own suffering. She tried to look away but couldn't, each scene a mirror to her own deepest fears and guilts. There was a suffocating weight, as if every hopeless thought she'd ever had now pressed down upon her, crushing her spirit. Then came the sense of judgment, not from an angry God, but from within herself, a searing awareness of the harm she'd done, the love she'd withheld, the forgiveness she'd never given or received. The flames weren't just fire, but memory and regret, burning hotter than anything she'd ever known. Emily wanted to scream, to plead for mercy, but every attempt was swallowed by the chaos around her. Time lost meaning, pain and despair were all that remained. I want to hear from you. What is your greatest fear about facing your past mistakes or regrets? Do you believe in forgiveness, even for yourself? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. Your vulnerability might inspire healing in someone else. Just as Emily thought she would be lost forever in this hellish torment, the chaos around her shifted. The screaming shadows recoiled as a blinding light appeared in the darkness. At first, Emily couldn't bear to look. The light was pure, searing, stripping away every layer of pretense. But then, from within the radiance, a figure emerged, a presence so powerful, so utterly compassionate, that the torment was forced to the edges of her awareness. The being stood before her, neither male nor female, yet radiating a deep familiarity. Emily recognized something in the presence's eyes, a sorrow that matched her own, but also a love beyond anything she'd ever known. She felt her soul laid bare, every secret exposed. But there was no condemnation in that gaze, only understanding, and a longing for her to see herself through different eyes. The entity spoke without words, communicating directly to her heart. Memories flooded back, not just of pain, but of kindness, of moments when she had chosen compassion instead of anger, love instead of fear. In the presence of this being, Emily saw her life as a tapestry, torn and stained, but also stitched with moments of grace. Tears streamed down her face, even in this disembodied state. For the first time since the accident, she felt the possibility of hope. The entity's gaze was a mirror, one that revealed both her wounds and her worth. Reflect for a moment. If you stood before a presence that saw all of you, your worst moments and your best, how do you think you would be judged? Would you judge yourself differently? Write your answer in the comments. You might help someone see themselves with a little more compassion today. The shocking message, prophecy and warning for the world standing in the presence of this radiant being. Emily felt a sudden shift, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The entity's gaze became more intense, and suddenly, visions began to flood her consciousness. She saw images of the world, cities trembling with unrest, forests burning, oceans rising, people crying out in confusion and fear. The suffering she'd witnessed in her own hell was multiplied on a global scale. But there was something else too, a sense of urgency. The entity revealed that the world was nearing a crossroads, a point where choices made by individuals and entire nations would determine the fate of many. Emily saw flashes of war and disaster, but also moments of incredible courage, compassion, and transformation. She realized that every act of kindness, every decision to forgive or help another, rippled outward in ways no one could imagine. The message was both a warning and a calling. The darkness is real, but so is the light. Each person has the power to choose which one they feed, within themselves and in the world. If humanity continued to ignore the suffering of others, to pursue only self-interest and power, the darkness would grow. But if people remembered to love, to show mercy, to lift one another up, there was hope for redemption. Emily was overwhelmed, trembling before the weight of what she was being shown. She understood that her journey was not just about her, it was about all of us. And with that knowledge came a new, burning sense of responsibility. Pause and consider. If you received a warning like this, a vision of what could happen to the world, what would you do differently in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your answer might be the wake-up call someone else needs. Emily wanted to stay in that presence forever. A place of truth, even with its pain, felt more real than anything she'd known. But as the visions faded, the entity looked at her one last time, filling her with an overwhelming sense of urgency. Without words, Emily understood. She had to return, to share what she'd seen, no matter the cost. A force, gentle yet unstoppable, began to pull her backward through the darkness. The agony of hell returned for a moment, but the entity's love surrounded her like a shield. Light and shadow swirled as she tumbled, falling faster and faster, until suddenly there was pain, real, sharp, earthly pain, filling her lungs with air and her ears with the distant sound of sirens. Emily's eyes flew open in the hospital. Tubes, beeping machines, worried faces, all blurred through tears. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone what had happened, but her voice was a mere whisper. The memory of the visions was so vivid that she wept, overwhelmed by the burden of what she now knew. In the days and weeks that followed, recovery was slow and lonely. Some believed her story, most did not. The fear of being called crazy nearly silenced her, but the responsibility weighed heavier than any doubt. She had seen the truth, and now she had to speak it, even if it cost her friendships, her job, even her sense of belonging. Reflect for a moment. If you were given a message that could change lives, even the world, but risked being rejected or misunderstood, would you still share it? Why or why not? Write your answer in the comments. Your courage might encourage others to speak their own truth. Life after death, or at least after returning from death, was never the same for Emily. The world she once saw in shades of gray now shone with both deeper shadows and brighter light. She faced sleepless nights, haunted by flashes of hell, but also moments of awe, remembering the gaze of the loving entity and the message she carried. Slowly, Emily transformed. She became more honest, more compassionate, less afraid of rejection. She reached out to others in pain, even strangers, determined to remind them that they were never truly alone. She found herself praying not for her own comfort, but for strength to forgive, to listen, to lift those still trapped in their own darkness. She discovered that every act of love, no matter how small, was an act of defiance against despair. Emily still struggled, and sometimes she doubted, but she never forgot the warning or the hope she'd been given, that even in the face of hell, we all have the power to choose the light. And now, she passes this challenge to you. Think deeply. How are you choosing to live your life today? Are there grudges you need to release, or kindnesses you've been holding back? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Write your answer in the comments. This isn't just Emily's story. It's yours too. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own life and your own choices, don't let the moment pass. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that can inspire transformation, hope, and courage, even in the darkest times. And don't forget, your words in the comments could be the light that someone else desperately needs.